I'm Jared Carpenter, and this is Future Signal. Back on the pod today, Andy's back. Andy, how you doing?
Hey, what's up? I'm doing great. How are you?
It feels like no time has passed, even though somehow a month has passed.
That's how great friends are, and that is the exact opposite of how the AI industry is. So
What do
I
you mean?
think that means we're mortal enemies with the AI industry. I don't know. I'm not sure, but it
We're mortal
happens.
enemies.
Mortal enemies. It's the opposite of great friends.
Okay.
We see each other again, and it's like no time has passed. And when I check my phone again, the AI industry has sped up 100 light years, and I'm like, okay, I don't even know. I don't even know you anymore. Is how is how it goes
I
down.
we often say in Bitcoin a week is like a quarter,
Yeah,
and this past week at work was insane. And
yeah,
I'm under NDA, so I can't share too much of it, honestly. But it's just you think we're out of the woods, and all of a sudden three more bosses are like waiting for you in the last in the
yeah.
last whatever of the video game. It's just kind of crazy. So, and that's in Bitcoin. And actually on one of the Bitcoin podcasts I did for work, we were talking about this and we were like, yeah, we think Bitcoin moves fast. And I'm like, I think AI is moving 10 times faster,
Hmm.
if not probably faster than that. But I just can only wrap my head around 10 times. So anyway, I can't imagine that you're right. By the time I hopefully see you in March, the world will be different when it comes to AI.
Yeah,
I normally have a holy host of things I want to talk about, but as you know, I just kind of wrote down some questions to just continue to move the ball forward on this. I mean, I think it's great having you on once a month because, like you said, in a month's time, so much can happen. And one of the first things I want to talk about is AI training models and where do they get their data? Because I was recently just seeing a couple of posts that Meta, in order to train their what I assume their LLM, they were stealing terabytes, and maybe I can even pull up the exact stat. Terabytes and terabytes of like data that obviously isn't theirs, but they're just like hijacking. And so how like ChatGPT, Claude, Gemini, wasn't it does Meta have a name for their AI? Like their
Llama. So
Llama.
the one that they release, open weights is called Llama.
Right. And I just saw this thing and I was mentioning to you, I was on Instagram right before we hopped up. Buddy sent me a post about something else and I was looking at, and then, you start to scroll and all of a sudden 3 hours have gone by and your life's worthless.
That's yep. And that data went into the model right there.
It
In
did.
in a lot of ways, I wish I was joking and might be incorrect, but I can only assume that is correct.
I think that that's highly correct. So just going back to that, you have Claude, you have Gemini, you have ChatGPT, you have Llama. How are they training these models? And it's almost like, do people not care anymore how they're training the models? Or because I feel like there's probably some ethical dilemmas around like copyright infringement, right?
Oh, totally. Yeah. So I think that this could probably be the biggest issue in AI that hasn't come to a head just yet. We talk a lot about safety and we talk a lot about, potential harms and security and how fast the industry is moving and that sort of thing, which yeah, all of those are really important topics. But end of the day, we have these models that have been trained on data that we have no idea. We have ideas, but we they're not necessarily obligated to disclose what that data is. And I think that they are sitting on a ton of copyrighted material, and this has become pretty clear to folks that are digging into this that they are accessing. The New York Times, for example, is alleging that that OpenAI accessed their website illegally, and or at least violating the terms of service, and are now kind of reselling that content in a way. And that's what the lawsuit basically alleges. And to best to my knowledge, or maybe just a high level overview. And there was actually a moment in OpenAI, in the ChatGPT product that it was actually spitting out verbatim text from the New York Times website, right? So like word for word, you could get it. Like if you knew how to ask it. And the response from OpenAI, again, I'm paraphrasing and I'm like glossing over a lot of the key details, but the response was like, "Oh, that's a glitch. We fixed it." And it's like, well, wait a second, like that's that's like you just prevented us from seeing what data you have even more, and now like that doesn't change the fact that like all of these models have been trained on data that is, allegedly through a lot of different lawsuits, copyrighted. One of the issues with that is that, I believe I've heard some writers refer to it as like the original sin of AI, because the way that a lot of these models are trained is that you will train a small model on a certain amount of data, and then you will actually use that model to help train the next model, right? And so it's a sort of bootstrapping process. A lot of people refer to this as like model distillation, in some contexts where you have a new model that was, they helped train on it. And so that copyright infringement, alleged copyright infringement, there's a claim to be made that it has transferred to another product, right? And this is the case. We see this in lawsuits all the time, right? So like if you stole this image and you used it on some record that you published, and printed out, but then like okay, that's one instance, but then like that record like ended up in a movie and like it was a part of the movie's like identity. It's like okay, both of those products are now tainted, right? And so a lot of people are alleging that like that is also the case for a lot of these models, given the fact that these issues are transferring. And there's a bunch of issues like this. There are cases where it's not even the model that is being trained on the data, but rather the model or the system that is retrieving the data. There was an example with Perplexity, the browser, the automated browser that would go and answer questions for you. And I'm sorry, it's an automated search engine, but it like does the browsing. And it truly will come up with like these stories and essentially like publish them on their platform. And one of them was truly just like it went to Forbes.com and it scraped it and it came back and it didn't repeat it word for word, but it was like very much like the basis of the entire article. And then Forbes was cited as a contributor, right? Which is like, I listened, I heard an interview with the CEO, and he was just like that's not attribution, like that's theft. Like you can't just come in and like take and then like, oh, by the way, this person like contributed to the article, right? Like that's insanity, right? It's like, oh, that was a glitch. And it's like, no, like that wasn't a glitch. Like you actually stole that content. Like imagine if you went into a liquor store and after the fact you're like, oh, sorry, I was glitched out. I didn't mean to take all that, or I go to Tiffany's, oh, I didn't mean to steal the bracelet. It's like those sorts of things, right? And so, it's a long way of saying that like this to me feels like a bomb that is waiting to go off, because this is almost certainly true for every single major AI lab in the world. And they have, fought tooth and nail. In some ways, uh, I think, in some ways they've done so that are within industry standards and norms, and in many ways are way outside of industry standards and norms. And, we will see if, years from now, those lawsuits gain enough traction that, we might see actual compensation for folks that come out of, hey, you made $1 trillion off of this product, but we need to see half of it go to, the victims of this fraud, or however they would refer to it. Of course, I'm like again paraphrasing something that's like highly legal and highly focused on like precision, but the general sense is there that this could be a bomb that's just waiting to go off.
Yeah, I think back to being an undergrad and having to use like Chicago. I think it was Chicago MLA was the acronym in my head.
Yep.
And you had to cite everything.
Yeah.
And if you messed up, you would get like say you were going to get an A minus, you would get a B minus just because you messed up the citation. So maybe our generation is also one of the last generations that's like hyper focused on that or had to go through that type of trial and tribulation, because for at least for me in undergrad, a lot of stuff was maybe JSTOR, but I was still using a lot of physical books.
Hmm.
And now that information is just everywhere and free, seemingly free, I don't know. So anyways, I was just very interested by that because it was saying something that I think it was like 70 terabytes of information. And if it's 70 terabytes of written documents, that is so much information. That is
Yeah,
like,
I
you know?
yeah, I doubt it. I doubt it's just writing. I mean, it could
Okay.
be, like PDF documents have a lot of data in there that aren't, the actual,
Infographics,
stuff.
pictures. Yeah.
And so, I can't speak about this issue in particular, but there have been documented cases where like a piece of text that should not, like, people have actually tested this where they would put a piece of text somewhere that they know was paywalled, and they actually would like not allow anyone to access it, and like deliberately, right? It's kind of like you're smoking out a traitor, right? It's like you tell one person something that's wrong, and then if you hear it back, then you know that that person told. That text would end up being retrievable by these agents online that are like going and doing it, right? And so it's like if you can reference it, then you've broken the law, or at least you've broken the terms of service that I've put up, right? And so yeah, I unfortunately I do think that it has been a free for all, and that is coming to a close, to the point where we're starting to see the internet respond to it, right? We're starting to see people, do a few different very clever things where, they will make it incredibly difficult to access if you're not actually a human, with like, CAPTCHA, if you've noticed, has gotten like much, much better, where, it's like hard for me to see. They're like, rotate this object and insert it here. And I'm like, geez, like this is like a geometry puzzle that I have to solve. Of course, it's like, this is solvable by an agent at this point, but it also just puts up a roadblock and, demonstrates that someone is like it helps like catch them in the act. If they have to work so hard to get it done, then it's like, okay, you're clearly like, not just answering the question, you're actually trying to break the test. Um, and a second thing that I think is really, really quite interesting is it actually came out. Speaking of Chicago, it came out of a lab in the University of Chicago. It's called Nightshade and Glaze.
Hmm.
These, you've heard of these maybe, and
You mentioned Nightshade 5 episodes
I
ago.
think
We were
so.
talking
Yeah.
about, yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, just a brief thing there is like, if they're going to steal the data, then you can taint it, so that it becomes less useful. And, in the case of Glaze, but then in the case of Nightshade, it actually becomes harmful to the data, where, they call it like a poison pill, where it will actually break, a classifier trying to understand what it's looking at. An image of a giraffe, they change a couple things that are mostly indistinguishable to human eyes, that then make it seem like a snowblower to the model, which is really fun. And just to think that you have someone who's working really hard and maybe they're very honest, but having a tainted data set and they just can't understand why it's not learning properly. I don't know. I think that especially for folks who are struggling in the fine arts industry right now, and working folks, I think that's a bit of Schadenfreude that might be deserved.
When you had mentioned that Nightshade, I remember I gave the example of like a college professor who sent out a PDF. It was like 2 pages of instructions on whatever I think she wanted the students to do: read a couple books, watch a movie, whatever. Synthesize data. This is where we were talking about of the, synthesize and like regurgitate back. And she spelt a bunch of words wrong.
Yeah.
And it was like last names. So for my name, maybe you left out one of the E's. So it was just, instead of Penter, it was just Pnter. But because it was like a name, it wouldn't always change. And so anyway, she did all these things and she caught like 80% of the kids because they just went home, uploaded that into probably ChatGPT. At that point, they were using, oh man, ChatGPT has come a long way. You used to have to like download the little widgets and you had to upload a widget that was like a PDF reader. Anyway, she caught a bunch of people.
Hmm.
And I'm just thinking like long term, if yeah, like I mean, I want the New York Times to stay around. I think that's a good thing. But like, if all of their data is getting ripped off, I don't know. I just don't. I'm trying to understand the future of the media landscape through the world of AI, and it's just kind of like it's going to happen so fast. And there's going to be a future where Taylor Swift. I'm just going to use Taylor Swift. People know who she is. Taylor Swift will have a blog that will be like a news blog, and maybe it's just like pulls from all these news sources in real time through an agent and just populate. So people now get their news from there and they don't have to go to CNN or Fox News. They can just go to TaylorSwift.news and they can read. And then it's just like, I don't know. I'm pretty worried about journalism right now in the world,
Mm.
just in general, because ever since we went away from print, everyone just expects everything to be free on the internet. I mean, I've done, gosh, over 200 plus episodes on my own here. I've never ever paid, no one's ever paid me. I don't want people to pay me personally, but like we have to figure out ways to keep certain people paid so that way they can go out and do the investigative journalism. Now I'm kind of going on a complete tangent, but when you think about AI, are you worried about the way it's going to influence media's integrity?
Yeah, 100%. And this is another kind of trend in the industry where folks are basically saying like listen, you might get away with this theft now, but like in reality what you've done is you've just made it harder to actually generate that content in the future. Hard hitting, like trusted journalism is not inexpensive, right? It is hard. It takes a long time. It might not make your readers happy at first. Like there's so many things about quality journalism that are essential to society, but and at the same time like not very sexy. And when you just BitTorrent 70 terabytes of data, which again is alleged, I'm not saying that that definitely happened, then you take money out of that journalist's pocket, right? And and as a result, you make journalism students less inclined to take those hard hitting journalistic jobs, and then as a result you make high schoolers and middle schoolers just less interested. And it's like there's a ripple effect throughout the entire industry and throughout all of society, where essentially this is a tragedy of the commons issue, where we have the perplexities and the u.coms and the waldos and the deep research agents of the world who are able to go out and essentially build a product on top of the people that have built the underlying product, which is like a piece of journalism or a piece of research or a piece of just insight from their blog or whatever. And it is the aggregators that are getting all of the money, not the contributors. And it's a tragedy of the commons because it's like I'm going to go out and take as much as I can, but at the end of the day, I'm not incentivized to replenish it, and because that will just get taken as well, right? And so um, I see, if that's one aspect of it, another aspect of it is that it's just so inexpensive to create content these days. And it will become it will cost virtually $0 to create YouTube content within the next 6 months, 12 months. And what does that mean for creators on the platform, but also what does that mean for the consumers on the platform? I mean, will people care, or do they just want their eyes to glaze over and kind of hit the slot machine one more time and see the buzzers, go and hear the sounds. It's like what will platforms like YouTube become? I'm not saying that they're like these great pillars of quality content today. But yeah, the incoming tidal wave of AI slop is a second aspect of what we're talking about that um, really concerns me and is something I think we need to kind of fight to prevent.
Yeah, something I think about a lot, and we've talked about on this just for me and media. I looked at something today. I think it was Sora, and it was no, it was a TikTok. Let me actually make sure I'm referencing this because I don't want to mess this up. And this is something I just saw today. It is ByteDance. ByteDance's Goku Plus. Now, ByteDance is the holding company of TikTok, It says ByteDance's Goku Class AI turns text into hyper realistic ad videos, cutting costs by up to 99%. Now,
Yep.
I shared this with the designer I work with, and he does a lot of our video editing, and he says our saving grace is that this sounds robotic and visually is very uncanny valley. But I said for now, in 6 months it won't be, and it actually, if you were just looking at it super quickly, you wouldn't know, and that actually leads into the next kind of question I want to ask you today was where are they, first of all, where are they getting the data for video? I assume it's the same way they're getting data. Like you said, it's not just text. It could be multimedia. It could be photos, videos, text, graphics. Where are they getting the stuff to, all the inputs to train on video? And then how does that necessarily work? Do we fully grasp how that works? I still feel like there's parts of AI we have kind of created, but we don't understand fully.
You mean like how they're training video models?
Yeah, and then how do the models, spit out when you say you want, a 6'2" model, to do? How does it work? I truly do not understand how that works.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. And so, I'm sure there's a ton of videos out there with folks who are going to do a much better job than I will. And of course, I'm generalizing a lot. I'll focus on the underlying technology for diffusion models, which are a primary way that a lot of folks approach this. But yeah, just the general background is the idea behind a diffusion model is that you can basically take an image, and if you add a bit of noise to it, then you have another image. And that image is the old image plus some noise. And you can do this repeatedly, repeatedly, repeatedly until you essentially just have random pixels, as a static TV. But what's really cool is that you can then reverse that. You have that image with some caption, a girl standing in a field holding, a watermelon on a sunny day. If that image has a caption, what you can do is you can then reverse the order of that and say start with a random noise, a random set of noise, and denoise it slightly using a deterministic filter, like it's a Gaussian filter with determinism, included, such that you then make the reverse jump to the noised, the really noisy image, right? So if you start with the original image and you take 300 steps towards a completely random image, you can then reverse that and say start with the noisiest and then go, step 299, step 288, 298. And what you can do is you can then train this model, a diffusion model, to predict or at least, work towards that slightly less noisy image, right? And so, the big idea is that like the model doesn't have to learn how to create an image. Like all the model has to do is make it like 1/300th more aligned with a girl standing in a field holding a watermelon on a sunny day, right? And so over time, when you have enough of these images, again, one image becomes 300 inputs to a model. If you have, a million images, that's a lot of images, right? We're talking about 300 million, all of a sudden that's kind of what you're doing. And if you train this model enough, well, then you can start to actually generate the next step in that denoising process, and then generate the next step in that denoising process, to the point where when you type in something in Stable Diffusion or any number of these different systems, I really liked the user experience that has mostly gone away now, where they would actually show you the denoising process, where you would have like this first image and then it was just like static, and then a second iteration would be a little bit less staticky, and you would sort of see the prompt that you asked for emerge from the
Mm-hmm.
noise. And that's exactly what's happening, right? And so yeah, it is basically a model that is trained to denoise random random pixels into a target text. And so it sort of emerges. And that's kind of the technology behind diffusion models, which is, a really brilliant way to do it. How a lot of folks are doing it with video is they're doing that. Suppose you have a 30-second video and you have 24 frames a second. Let's just use a round number of 10,000 frames, which does not add up to what I just said, but 10,000 frames. Then what you want to do is you actually will set out 10,000 different images that are being predicted from this model, where the step from the denoising step, that actually will then they have a really clever way where they're actually syncing that denoising step across the 10,000 frames, right? And so all of a sudden you're starting to see, well, this image moved towards, it denoised a bit and moved towards, an image of, a knight holding a sword, in front of a castle. But then given the sync between, image one and image two, it is that knight again, they're all taking this step in sync, but slightly different because it's now his sword is down a little bit, right? And so what emerges is unlike when we're filming something, we film it sequentially. A lot of these systems will actually create the entire sequence simultaneously. And so these 10,000 images stay synced up, and 10,000 is like too much. Call it 100, right? Something that's a little bit simpler. The magic of the sync between those images is something we could spend like all day talking about. But like end of the day, it sounds simplistic to say, but when we're generating videos with these AI models, they are just generating sequences of images in parallel in some cases, that then sort of all cross the finish line at the same time, that then appear to be a video, right?
So it's kind of like it's just a stop motion. That's all it is.
Yeah, I mean, if you decompose video, it becomes a sequence of images, right? And so
Hmm.
they've reversed that, where they generate a sequence of images and then it becomes a video. And there are a lot of folks. Again, this isn't for everybody, but a lot of folks are doing this with diffusion models. And I can go even farther into diffusion models that have like patches, so that you're not generating an entire image at the same time, but rather you're generating little bits of that image that are synced across, that are then synced higher order with their parent patches and things like that. But yeah, end of the day, we're generating individual images that then get synced up, using again a number of different models, but diffusion models are definitely one of them that are very popular.
That's kind of
Um,
hard for me to wrap my head around, you know?
yeah, for sure. No, for sure. I mean, these are things. This is not a physical law of the universe. This is something that someone had to sit down and work on in teams of people. But then, you know, the fact that it's hard to wrap your head around is probably a big contributor to why it was only recently invented, right? I mean, I know that the data was also a bottleneck and the compute was a bottleneck, but this algorithm is just like, how could this possibly work, right? But it does. And so that was sort of the second part of your question for like how a lot of these video models actually work. But to your point about the first question, in the training data, I've been saying for a while, I think Google got a kind of a false or a rocky start, when it comes to building out their models that were competing directly with OpenAI and Anthropic. But one thing I've been telling people is like, do not sleep on Google, because like the number one contributor to these models, like their performance and that sort of thing, by my estimation, is the data. I mean, we talk a lot about the compute, and the compute is very important. But as we've
Mhm.
seen with Llama and I'm sorry, with Alpaca, which was a model that was developed on consumer grade hardware that competed with GPT 3.5, that trained only on GPT-4. This was out of Stanford, I think, in 2022. Um, so through the Alpaca example, but then also through Again, a lot of the model distillation techniques that we've been discussing, like it is possible. Oh, for example, the phi models out of Microsoft, the famous paper textbooks are all you need. They trained on the best data, and that showed that computation could go down, and performance could still be up. Anyway, the trend is there that the data is just so crucial. And so, not only does Google have the data, the compute in their TPUs, but they have more data than anyone on the planet. Like, I mean, maybe we've got some competition with some governments around the world who are collecting a ton of data, but like, Google has thousands of data points on every single American citizen just to start, right? They have, thousands of hours being uploaded to YouTube every second. Like, you know, and so again, there's a lot of breakthroughs associated with this. But if you look at Veo 2, their video generation model, it is by far, like, I mean, there's a ton of models out there and it changes every hour. I mean, my news could be old at this point, but like Veo 2 is the first time that I saw a model that was like, holy cow, like this is pixel perfect. Like I'm watching this. I showed, my wife, I showed my friends, like, oh, what do you think of this commercial? And they're like, it's kind of boring, it's like it feels a little weird. And I'm like, AI made it. They're like, what? Like it's just like bonkers that like the first thought was like, oh, the humans that made that like weren't really thinking about the comedy correctly. You know what I mean? And it's like, well, wait a second, like there were no humans involved. And again, we can talk all day about the provenance of the data, having humans involved. But yeah, the point is there that Google has YouTube, which is the most important data set on the planet for training these models. And I think it's reflected in the models that they're publishing now.
Well, it's kind of meta because this is going to be on YouTube, so people could be watching you say that on YouTube, and
Yeah, and that would train the future models,
we're just
which would
training.
then
We're training the models. That's all
it,
humans do now.
I had this realization. I was like running along the Charles River, like, well, I think this was like 5 years ago, and it was like I'm living in a data set right now. I'm clicking next on the Spotify. I'm like tracking my steps. Like a model from the future is training on me right now, and it was just like this really weird sort of realization.
The Matrix is all about how the humans are the energy for the AI, right? We just live in these little pods and we give off energy. But we know now that the oil of our day is info. And so we are just the oil for AI, like
Yeah,
in
and
everything we do.
yeah, and unfortunately, I think we're getting swindled. A big there's a story that looms large in my mind, like the story, the fable of like stone soup, if you're familiar with it.
No, no.
So, I mean, this is something that a lot of kids grew up with. I grew up with it, but the idea is that a bunch of folks come to town, they're newcomers, an old bucolic place somewhere, probably in Germany, given the origin of the story or wherever. But and they are like, oh, well, can you feed us? We're traveling, we'll entertain you. And they're like, no, we don't know you. Like, what are you talking about? And they're like, oh, no matter. Like, we'll just make our own soup. And it
Mm.
starts with, they're like, we'll just make soup out of stones. And the townspeople are like, what are you talking about? They're like, oh, you've never had stone soup before? And they're like, no. It's like, oh, it is so good. Like, they start boiling the stones. They start doing like, magical incantations in some versions and that sort of thing. And then they taste it. And they're like, oh, it's so good. Oh, you know what? What would make it even better is just a few carrots. And one of the townspeople is like, "Oh, well, I've got carrots, right?" And so they go run off. They get the carrots, and they do it again. Oh, what would taste so good is like adding some potatoes, right? Oh, another townsperson. Oh, I've got potatoes. On and on and on. You can see where we're headed here, where they have this big beautiful soup at the end of it, and the entire town is like, wow, like these, I love stone soup. like these people that came to town, like, we're so sorry we questioned you, and like how great this experience has been. Like, thank you for doing this, right? And of course, like, you take a step back and you know that like these are swindlers. They got these people to act like they were contributing when in reality they were just taking. It's so appropriate for the frontier AI labs right now. Like, we truly are like using these products day in and day out, and we're like, wow, like, can you believe how smart these models are? It's like we wrote the content that they're training on. Like, you came into our homes and you like took information off of our phones, and like every conversation we've ever had with every loved one like is in your model, and like now you sound like someone that I know, and like I'm attributing that to you for some reason, right? And so I think the parable of stone soup is very applicable here. And again, I use AI every day. I work in artificial intelligence. I am very thrilled about the future of it. I'm a booster through and through, but like end of the day, it's like we have to reconcile the fact that this data is not intended for this type of use, and it's being sold back to us while we depreciate the value of hardworking folks who are creating new versions of the data, like the journalists, like the filmmakers, like the fine artists whose livelihoods are being truly taken away.
I'm not even going to cut out this pause. It needs to be there. I don't even know what to say. Well, actually, I do know what to say. I was thinking about this the other day, and it's like within by 2030, and the help me out. What is the award if you're a good actor? Grammys is for music. Tony's is
Oscars,
for
yeah.
Oscars. I think by 2030, you're going to have an entire section that's just going to be for AI movies. So that way, AI movies don't basically flood the rest of the categories. I just saw The Brutalist. I don't know if you've seen it. It was incredible. I thoroughly enjoyed it. It's about 3.5 hours. There's an intermission, which I thought was kind of interesting.
Love intermissions.
Kind of a harken back to the old days of like, going to a show. And it was awesome because when you're an hour and 45 in and you've been, chugging seltzer water and popcorn, it's nice. It's a good break. You know what I mean? So I found out later that Adrian Brody, in order to get his accent to be the way he needed it to be for that, they went in post and they used AI to make it like perfect because he was really, really worried that because Adrian Brody is in Peaky Blinders had a really good like Italian American accent. Obviously, in The Pianist, he has a different accent when he was trying to escape Nazi Germany. So, anyways, AI is like definitely playing a part in movies. Probably has been for a while, but this was like one of the first times where it was definitely like tweaking a human being that got so much acclaim. And I also think that this movie is going to win a lot of awards. So, anyways, when it comes to that, like if humans creating stuff, I do think that by 2030, the Oscars, even the Grammys, they may have an entire section that is AI or not. And I don't believe you're on Instagram, but on Instagram now, you can, before you post something, you can toggle on or off, was AI influencing this post, whether it was in the copy or whether it was actually like the image. Just because people, still use, Instagram is art in some sense, and people like to perfect certain things. I want to do a word association with you. We've never done this. I'm really excited.
Okay, well, this is good. Real quick, if I can just respond to that.
You don't want to do word association.
No, I do. I do. I just,
Okay,
just
go.
real quick, like, AI is a broad term. The idea of machine learning algorithms, or statistical models, or anything that just automates some decision making process or some change, has been applied to movies and music for decades, right?
For decades, for sure.
We saw in the 90s, we've got Tyrannosaurus Rexes, breaking down electric fences that aren't real, right? We've got, liquid
That
metal.
wasn't real.
Yeah, they've got liquid metal killers, going through prison bars, and that sort of
Hmm.
thing, right? um, I think that we're now at a point where folks are associating everything that has been impacted through some of these processes as oh, this is ChatGPT, right? Like,
Hmm.
oh, this is AI, right? That sort of thing. And so I totally agree with you. I also just want to make sure that like it's clear, like we should be precise with the language, and like folks are saying like, oh, I don't want to watch any AI movies. It's like, well, you've been watching AI movies, since like a long time ago, right?
Yeah, and
Um,
let me hop in because you're totally right. I mean, I don't think aliens came down in 1996 and started a war with us, and then Bill Pullman got on a thing and like we kicked them out, right? CGI. I think you're totally right. I guess what I and let me clarify. I think there'll be full movies that are basically all done with
yep,
AI.
yep,
Full movies, not like Avatar James Cameron where there's like an uncanny valley and you did actually have actors running around with a green screen and certain
yep,
prompts on. Like full AI,
end to
right?
end, yep,
End to end, and you probably only need 10 people to get the movie off the ground. Once you maybe, I don't know what's going to happen with the rights, but like if I buy the rights of like Hugh Jackman because I want to do this X-Men project, and he's like, okay, fine, give me whatever cut like I normally
100%.
get. That's what I mean. Because yeah, you're totally right. Otherwise, every single thing in the movies has some amount of fix.
Yeah, yeah. No, I totally agree with you. And so, yeah, setting that aside, it's like when we have those AI movies, yeah, how's the industry going to respond to that? And, I mean, we're already seeing folks losing their jobs and, the jobs in Hollywood right now for a lot of different reasons. But, one of these as well is just drying up. And so, yeah, are we going to have an Oscar for, hey, this is the last Oscars because all the movies in the AI section are better than us. Who knows? But yeah, I'd much rather pay folks to create and keep creating and do it with AI. But we'll see how that shakes out.
Back to word association.
All
Are
right.
you ready?
Oh, I'm ready.
This is one word. It's a compound word. It's a new word to the lexicon of many, but it hit in between our last recording and this recording. It is DeepSeek. Go.
DeepSeek. Okay. DeepSeek, not a model. DeepSeek is a company. It's a fintech hedge fund in China. They developed a lot of really great models. One is DeepSeek V3 that was used to help build DeepSeek R1. DeepSeek V3 is a much bigger deal in my mind than DeepSeek R1, but DeepSeek R1 is the one that captured everyone's attention because it competes with OpenAI's O1. And it's a feat of engineering. It's a beautiful piece of technology that thankfully, in my mind, is they offer open weights so you can download the model, and they offer open architecture so you can see how they trained it and how it's built. I'm given despite that, it is much less. It is a much smaller deal than people are making of it. It's not open source, that's first and foremost because we don't know what data it was trained on, and it is not, nearly. So the big takeaway is like they only use $6 million to train the model. You know, in that way of accounting, I only needed $100
To buy your house.
to buy my house because on that particular day I only transferred $100 to the to the person, and then the next day I put in 50 grand or whatever. It's just they were very precise about this. I'm not saying that DeepSeek and that team is lying. I think that sensationalist folks wanted to pull cherry pick quotes from the paper. It by all accounts it probably costs on the order of we're talking tens of millions, probably hundreds of millions of dollars to get these models out the door when you consider humans, when you consider all the chips that it took to train the models that they then used for experimentation purposes. I mean, just across the board. And furthermore, we were also seeing that the trends in price reduction are actually within like a 2 or 3x, some say like 3 to 5x, differential between the actual training for DeepSeek V3 and then R1, as was the case for O3. I'm sorry, '01, 6 to 9 months ago, right? And so we're actually seeing like a continuation of the drop, and which is predicted,
Mhm.
which again within 3 to 5x is actually pretty good prediction. Again, it's a feat of engineering that made things cheaper, but this whole narrative that like, oh, China made something with $6 million that we spent $1 billion on, and as a result, we're cooked. It's just like please understand the research better. Please read folks who are a little bit more grounded in it, and see it for the great feat of engineering that it is. But it is not this colossal thing that is coming for everybody's jobs.
In the world of AI, I see a lot of knee jerk reactions to news
Yep.
like that.
Yep.
And when DeepSeek came out, it was the Monday after. When I say came out, like when it was launched, it was the Monday after the week before where President Trump had announced the Stargate
Yep.
initiative, where he's giving half a trillion for AI investments in the U.S.
Yeah, and he's not giving anything, right? This is 100% from private companies.
Okay, private companies. Okay,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
It was just such a gut punch for the U.S. AI team because I
Yep.
feel like we're back in the Cold War and we're like, who can get up into the outer atmosphere? Who can go around the Earth? Who can go to the moon?
Right.
And this felt like we were really excited because we got to the outer atmosphere, and then they send what was it, Sputnik or whatever that went around the globe or whatever. So it was just kind of like, damn, and I read the article and it said something about Sputnik, and I was like, oh, that's a pretty good parallel. The stock market took a huge deal.
Oh
We're
my
talking like
gosh.
$2 trillion came out of the stock market over
Insane.
the next 10 days
Yeah.
because of that knee jerk reaction. Now everyone is a little bit better read on it. I love what you've just said. Clearly it didn't cost them $6 million, right? Like
Yeah. Yeah.
that's just not how that works. I want to move on though because by the time this comes out, DeepSeek is like ancient history at this
I know,
point.
right?
So, Deepa Deepa is a woman who runs Grant Orb. She came on and she was talking about her product that allows nonprofits or anyone really to be able to go ahead and get grants. And I just love what she posts on on X. And she posted something the other day that I thought was interesting. It said, "Today I spoke with 100 people who've never used AI." And I said, "Oh, yeah," in a comment. And she said, "Yeah," in another comment. "Yes, from America. We live in a bubble." And I was very interested by this and it made me start to think now, in the world, let's say there's 8 billion people. There's probably like 8.1, 8.2. I'm not going to count them all. Let's say there's 8 billion people. There's probably a small amount, less than 1% of people that have never used the internet, I would venture to say.
Yep.
And there's obviously certain tribes and places. There's like over in Papua New Guinea, there's still islands you can't go near because the people will kill you. And there's still tribes in the Amazon that they totally respect near, like in the Brazilian Colombian border. We're just going to leave those people be. Great. They're living life. Other than that, I feel like most people on the planet have dealt with the internet at one point or another. So I use 1% lightly, but let's go with 1%. Now, when I think about AI, what is your percent of people do you think that you think have engaged with AI knowingly or unknowingly today?
Oh, I mean, you mean of the people that have access to the
Of
internet?
Yeah, you could say I think you need the internet to be able to do this, but of the 8 billion,
Yeah.
what do you think? Of the 8 billion, I've just basically said I think only 80 million or less, and I think it's probably way less. I'm just being like quasi conservative because I don't know, just for the thought experiment. What I'm trying to get out is how many people out of the 8 billion have engaged with AI knowingly or not knowingly in their lifetimes. What do you think that is right now?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, if you look at the folks who, call it, internet users, so that's like above the age of, call it 13 or maybe 10 now, or maybe 4 now. And
Yeah, I
and
was gonna
and
say, I Jeff's kids are they're so adept with YouTube and they can put on Mario
yeah.
Kart and go play games and get into the
Yeah.
internet. It's pretty crazy.
No, for sure, for sure. Folks that if we're calling them users, I mean, I would have a hard time. I think that this is a question that requires like we should really do a deep dive on the data. Um, I'll just say like kind of knee jerk, again, going back to a knee jerk reaction, like I'll say that I think that a majority have interacted with AI, and maybe a significant percentage of that is unknowingly, right? And
Mhm.
so, this gets back to the question about the Tyrannosaurus Rex, right? Like we all knew that there wasn't a Tyrannosaurus Rex that was, breaking through that fence, right, in Jurassic Park in 1996, that it was actually CGI. But like when someone posts on Instagram and, says like, "Hey, cute pic," it's like we might not know that that's actually a bot, and they're trying to like lure us in and like, get us hooked on their account and, whatever, right? And so, yeah, I think that there's a huge percentage of, or I'd say a significant percentage of folks that are using AI, or at least interacting with AI today, and just don't know it. And I'm much more interested in that percentage of people, because I think when they start to know it, there we'll have a real awakening to the power of the technology. I think a lot of people that are pushing back right now just don't know that they're actually being impacted every day by it.
Well, that was my second question, and you jumped it. I first wanted to know what your thought was
Got it.
of the total percent, and then how many of the breaking that, because then I was going to go 80-20. 80% have no idea they're engaging with it. 20% are people who, are paying for the chat GPT, are
Mhm.
leveraging two or three, have Gemini open, have ChatGPT, and have Claude, and are just trying to see which model is going to give them the
I I
best thing.
yeah, I would put that number way lower. I mean, for like the power users who are paying and using it regularly, like I do think we live in a bubble. Um,
Okay, because and that's exactly what Deepa said. Deepa
yeah.
sits and talks all day, and you guys should probably connect. I mean, she's just as all she's doing these days is AI stuff, and she, saying, I just love that tweet. It's such a simple tweet. Today I spoke with 100 people who've never used AI, and that's even in the United States, where, in the United States, just for like a crypto example, right? Over 10% of people have a Coinbase account. Never mind, like in crypto, they have a
Mm,
Coinbase account.
yeah.
So, and I think at one point, ChatGPT was the quickest application or social application ever to 100 million users. I don't even know how many users they have now. Story in my head is it's probably closer to a billion, that at least have an account. Probably not a paid account like you said, but I don't know. I was just kind of interested by that because I still feel like we're so early to the mass adoption of this, where, like you've said, everyone has agents everywhere and they don't even know it, or they don't even think of it as an agent. They're just like, oh yeah, that's how I order my medicine to my house. I use
Ex-
this app.
exactly. Yeah. I mean, if you've ever ordered Amazon, and it's been delivered, like you've used AI, right? And maybe we need to change the definition so that we have a bit more precision. But yeah, I mean, generally speaking, that's true.
I can't find the tweet. She also had a tweet that I was interested to share with you, and I thought I saved it. Let me see if I can find it here. But it was basically like, I don't use ChatGPT anymore, and it was, I use, I believe, Claude and Gemini, and she had reasons why, and I don't know if I can find it, but it's ChatGPT, and ChatGPT is the one I use, and it's not out of like, I think it's the best. I just haven't done. It's like I put on Nikes and I like the way they fit. I don't
Mm.
know what Adidas and Reebok and Under Armour and all these other New Balance have for shoes. I feel like this works. You know, maybe like if it ain't broke, don't fix it type of attitude. But which is like do you use different? I want to say LLMs. I'm not sure if that's right, for different tasks. And one of the things she said, and I really hope I could just find this because that would be better. But she said she used one for deep research and one for reasoning. And she said, using the mix of those is way better than just using just ChatGPT all the time. Does that resonate with you?
Yeah, yeah, for sure. I think some models are better than others at certain tasks. The list that this isn't what I use, but the list that I usually hear goes along the lines of, for AI enabled search, use Perplexity; for coding, use Claude; for just like everyday conversations, use ChatGPT; and then for like deep, reasoning and stuff like that, use the like O 03 mini model from ChatGPT. and then the list goes on for even more fine-grained tasks. But yeah, I mean, I think that a lot of the models are interchangeable for these tasks. But yeah, as you get into more like pro use cases, I think that you find where the limits of one, where you butt up against the limits of one, and another one kind of exceeds that expectation.
Yeah, I've never heard of Perplexity. Can you tell me more about that?
Yeah, Perplexity is an AI enabled search engine, and
Okay.
again, they have their own index now, I think. But yeah, they are basically they build out these agents that traverse the web and go and find information related to what you need, and then will synthesize it and then respond. So rather than like searching for results, you're like getting answers from the web. Is the idea, and everyone has a version of this, right? I mean, OpenAI has a version of this. Gemini, through Google search has a version of this. And the most recent product, Deep Research from OpenAI, it does this. It does this like so exceedingly well that, in my mind, Deep Research from OpenAI is probably, you know, probably the most impactful product that they've ever delivered outside of ChatGPT, which is wild to think about, but it's a huge deal. So we'll see how Perplexity kind of distinguishes itself in the future.
I want to ask you a question. How much more time do you have? Do you have like 15 more minutes? Because I want to open up a different can of worms.
I have 10 more minutes. So yes,
Okay.
let's open it up.
You sure?
Yep.
Okay. On the episode that will actually, the previous episode, this will be episode 14. On the 13th episode, I had John Ruth on. And John and I did almost a 3 hour long podcast, but we broke it into two. So his part will come out before this. His second part will come out before this. But one of the things we were talking about was UBI. I don't think you and I have ever talked about UBI, but in a world where even 3 to 5% of people who are working today, they have a job and they make money, and that's how they get a roof and they put food on their table and they pay for their utilities, and that's how they live life. Even in a world where like 3 to 5% lose their jobs like forever, that's a massive issue. And we know it's a massive issue because we basically had a sneak preview of that in March of 2020 when overnight people were just, it was just like a wrecking ball. And I was talking to John the other day, and have you heard about WorldCoin? Do you know about WorldCoin? Okay.
I've heard of it. I'm aware of its backstory and who's involved, but yeah.
Yeah. And just if you're listening, WorldCoin, this is going to be a really TLDR on the WorldCoin. WorldCoin is a cryptocurrency. It is a layer two cryptocurrency that is built on Ethereum. And the idea is in order to get some of WorldCoin, you have to scan your iris, prove that you're human, and that iris code will then basically create a wallet that is unique to you, and then you will get WorldCoin. And the idea in Sam Altman's mind, and this is the most evil like James Bond shit I think he's ever done, is that everyone will scan their eyeball, they'll be in their database, and then as AI continues to grow and ChatGPT and OpenAI continue to grow and their revenue grows, they'll take 5%. I'm not sure of the number, just earnings against the wall. They'll take a certain percent of their revenue and then divide it amongst all the wallets monthly. So that way people and humanity can basically benefit from AI taking over certain industries and sectors into the future, right? In perpetuity. Now, I think that this is very, very bad and very, very wild. And one of the biggest things with crypto is that it's decentralized and that there should not be centralized control of a blockchain because then you have too much power. I'm like, oh, Andy didn't come to my birthday. I don't like Andy anymore. He's not getting paid. I just delete his wallet or I drain his wallet and he's gone. But I wanted to get into UBI and ask, do you see though the need for a potential UBI if AI does start to take over the next 10 to 20, even probably in the next 5 months to 5 years, many jobs? Do you talk about this with other people in your AI kind of networks, and just personally, how do you think about that?
Yeah, for sure. So I think the term UBI, it has a lot of baggage because there's again, just like everything else, it's become sort of a rallying cry, but it's also become a label that other folks, throw at each other, neo-Marxism, blah, blah, blah. And so, it's hard for me to kind of wade through the noise as a layperson and have a strong opinion about it. I will say that, like, stepping away from that term, like, we will need folks to have some sort of net in this country, and I think, around a lot of the world, that allows them to continue thriving outside of what we would normally think of as like a day in, day out economic input to a capitalist machine, right? I think that folks are going to need to have something because so much of it is being taken away. We we just saw that the unemployment numbers, um, softened up, particularly in information technology sector, just recently. And some of the folks talking about that, the analysts are saying, this is the first peek into like an AI, depletion of jobs that we're seeing, right? And of course, we just had, the United States represented in the Paris AI Summit, AI Action Summit in Paris, and JD Vance says, humans, AI will never replace humans, right? We're gonna let her rip. We're gonna open up. Y'all can build whatever you want, and we're not gonna be worried about safety. And I think we're early enough in this conversation where that it could be the case that that's true. I don't think so. I think that it's a high, high, high likelihood that that's false. But like, I think to have that opinion, I do think that there's enough. Like, I think that a data driven response is warranted. Um, like, show me the numbers where you think that that's true, right? Like, every leader of every major lab in the world is saying there will be job losses, and like it's not enough to just say, like, no, it won't. Like, we will persevere, and that sort of thing. And so I, I definitely see job loss coming. I see, ways of life being totally upended. And so I do think that at some level we're going to need some compensation, again, either from the companies that are, delivering all these products, or from, some sort of social net. If that comes in the form of like a universal basic income, then maybe that's fine. Or if we, unilaterally decide that all of this type of work still needs to be done by humans, or there's so many economic levers that we can pull. And I think that the internet just sort of coalesces around like whatever term is cool this week, and like UBI is one of them. But like, there's so much we can do. But right now, the idea that the billionaires are going to give some of their money away, when the time comes, like, it's absolutely nonsense. Like, at every single turn, at every single opportunity along this arc so far, whether it was the dot-com bubble, or whether it was tulip mania in the Netherlands, last century, whatever. We know how this is going to end. Like, we will not get that money, because like, any gains that are made by a private company do not get passed on to the consumers in a way that is actually meaningful. And so, call it UBI, call it whatever you want, use a different approach, but like, end of the day, like, this will have to be forced. And we will need this money somehow.
I have so many things to say, but I want to respect your time. We've just hit around 10 minutes from when you said that. So I'm going to put your LinkedIn and put all your contact in the episode show notes. And if you're watching this on YouTube, please subscribe. Listening to this on a podcast platform, please subscribe. Andy will be back next month in March to continue talking about, I was going to say UBI, continue talking about AI. And follow us on social media at Future Signal Pod. And if you want to check out our website, we're at futuresignal.xyz. Andy, thank you so much once again for taking the time.
Cool. Hey, thanks so much. Love being here.